So, hi everyone, my name is Matt Frater. I'm a senior dev on the Fairfax Content API team. And what I'd like to demonstrate for you today is this management tool that we've called Capisce. I suppose what you could describe Capisce as is the content management system for Elasticsearch queries for the Fairfax Content API. It has various bits of interesting functionality. And it's attempting to solve various issues. And probably the best way to look at it is, let's say that you're a mobile application developer and you're creating an app that you want to make use of Fairfax content. In other words, you want it to consume our APIs. And you know that the Content API uses Elasticsearch, but you really don't want to be involved in developing lots and lots and lots of complex JSON and application logic around that. That can result in very complex application code, lots of code reviews, difficulty in getting things through. A lot of people might not understand how to put Elasticsearch queries together. It results, obviously, generating that JSON at runtime can result in lots of things like hefty use of CPU cycles and device memory. Not to mention passing those big chunks of JSON back and forth over the internet and using up bandwidth. So what Capisce and its associated APIs attempt to do is to abstract all of that out into this management system and the associated APIs. And the easiest way to demonstrate that is just to show you the app running. So if I was to log into Capisce itself, okay. What you'll see here, this is a very, very early pre-beta of the system, which is why there's only 2 queries listed in here. But these are what the objects look like. Each of these queries has a name, an author, which is typically the person who was logged in when it was created, an automatically generated UID, a status, a timestamp, and an API key, which is used for authentication further down the track against the API. So if I was to open up one of these things, what you can see here is, once again, we have the name, which is just the reference, the API key, which is used for authentication. And here we start having things that are saved again, that are queried against the Elasticsearch index or indices. So I have an index or indices indeed that I want to search, and I have an asset type, which in this case is a venue, and then I have my actual JSON. And as you can see, anybody who's familiar with Elasticsearch, it should be fairly obvious that this is very much standard JSON for Elasticsearch. You might find there's one unusual pattern here, which is this pattern, and these are our substituted parameters. Basically, what these amount to is runtime parameters, which means that you can change the way the query behaves and what it returns at runtime when you hit the API. So if you're the administrator, you have the ability to preview this thing against the API and change it on the fly. You can approve it, assuming that it works well and you feel that it's performant and it gives what it's supposed to give, or you can reject it if it turns out that it's going to degrade performance on the index, or you think it's doing something unsafe or unwise. So in order to preview this thing, logically enough, you click preview. Capisce has correctly detected that we have a runtime parameter in this one called statebox, which I can say NSW for New South Wales, preview that, and there we go. I have results directly coming out of Elasticsearch so that I can see what kind of information I get back, how long the query took, whether all the shards were successful, and so on. Just to prove that this actually does work, if I change that to Tasmania, say, and re-preview, I get, oh dear, only 2 documents. But this is pulling live information straight out of the Elasticsearch index, which I think works really nicely. The other thing that we can do in terms of changing the runtime parameters is we can change not only values in these in these JSON objects, but we can actually change keys as well. So if I was to say query and turn that into a runtime parameter and re-preview that, it's asking me for a value for query, which it will insert into the JSON. Now, obviously, that's going to be query, but if I was to mistype something, go blah, preview, what's going to happen is that Elasticsearch is going to give me an error because it doesn't understand the query. So you can really test these things quite easily on the fly as you go. So query, preview that. There we go. So the substitution is working, and you can add as many of those as you like. The other thing that Capisce gives you the ability to do is to approve or reject these queries, which essentially means that they become available or not in the API. So to do that, here we go. This is the actual API endpoint that the app would hit in order to run this query and get the results. So once again, our runtime parameter is called statebox. So if I was to add that statebox SW, run that query, and there you go. I've got 2,136 documents in exactly the same way. I can do exactly the same thing by changing that to Tasmania, and I get exactly the same too. So that actually works really nicely. And obviously I get reporting on the back end in terms of which API keys are using which query and so on. So if I'm the administrator and I decide that this particular query is running too slowly, the data that it's bringing back is too large, it's degrading the performance for other clients and things like that, I can reject it, like so, which has an immediate effect, as you can see. All of a sudden, I get a 404 result back instead, and I get query not found. So I can publish and unpublish these things at will. If I revive it, it doesn't go straight back into the index. You can still see that it's not found. Reviving just means, okay, this is in need of review from an administrator again, just to make sure that it works. And if I decide that that one's okay, I can approve it. Rerun the query, and there it is. The other thing that Capisce offers, which is really a brand new function for it, is the concept of versioning. So let's say I've got 5 or 6 different versions of this query, and we know that version number 3 is good, but version number 4 is bad because it's too slow or too complicated or something like that. I would just click versions, there we go, and I can get back to the various ones that I want. The other thing that happens when I go back to a version is, even if my query is in an approved state, see if I want to go back to that one there, I go revert, it okays it for me, but all of a sudden, although I've reverted my source of truth version here in the local Capisce database, the version that actually runs on the API is the same one that it was previously, and if I want to update it in the actual API, once again, I would go approve. And that's really Capisce and its associated APIs in a nutshell. We're adding new features to it all the time. We're adding new features to it all the time. But essentially, this is our take on query templating and parameter substitution. So effectively, it means that if you're the app developer and you wish to consume the Fairfax content, all you really need to do is get yourself a signed query from an administrator, such as Jeremy here, who will look at the JSON that you propose to run against the index and decide whether or not it's suitable and work with you in order to make sure that it's going to give you exactly what you need. Once it's approved and you have your UID, once it's approved and you have your query UID and your API key, constructing calls to this API is really very straightforward. All you need is your runtime parameters, indeed if there are any. And that's really about it. So, thank you very much.